Welcome, Home and Podcast fans. This is Jordan, co-host of the Home and Podcast, and we have another special edition of the Home and Podcast this week. We've got part 2 of our interview with Patricia Richardson, who played Jill on Home Improvements. We had so much ground to cover with her that we had to split the episode into 2 parts, so we still have another hour to go. We're going to finish up a speed round with lots of different questions. We are going to talk a little bit about the West Wing and some other things, other roles that she worked in. Many more things, many more home improvement insider tidbits. And Patricia gets a little feisty with us. We talk a little bit about Howard's End, an episode that is near and dear to her heart. So we'll dive into that and many more. If you haven't listened to part 1, go back and do that, and then listen to part 2. And with that, enjoy.
So transitioning, kind of a different question here, but strangest compliment or gift from a fan?
Oh, strangest.
Yeah, I don't know. Strange question, maybe.
I'm trying to think if I had wonderful compliments. Yeah. I had scary.
Yeah, well, you can. Hey.
I had the best compliment I ever got is my friend and I were in the airport, and I think it was Dallas, and this woman that was waiting on us she said, "I have to tell you, I went back to school because Jill did." Which was, I was like, "What? Really?" She said, "Yep, thank you so much. It really changed my life." And I was like, holy moly. And I had another person say, "Our father was dying of cancer, and this show was the only thing that made him laugh, made all of us laugh together as a family that all those last months when he was sick." And that kind of thing I heard more than once. And it made me, so happy to hear that. We heard a lot of, for the women watched the show because of Jill and the marriage and the relationship. And I would often hear, "I have 3 boys too." And I related so much to Jill because I have 3 boys and I'm the only woman in the family. Or I related so much to this because those fights you guys had, it was just, oh my God, it was like you were looking through our window. And just the whole family life, it's like so much like our family that my husband and I would just turn and look at each other and go, wow. This is us, So what I felt so much at the time, and people were so nice to me. They'd wait until me and my kids were on the way out of McDonald's or whatever it was, and say, "We didn't want to interrupt you while you were eating, but we love the show." When I had that kind of consideration from people, I was so appreciative. That was awesome. But, there are a lot of people that hated Jill, and I made the mistake a couple times of going on IMDb and reading comments
on the Home Improvement
session, which was,
yeah, definitely.
Oh my God, I was so shocked. There are all these guys who are like, "Jill is such a bitch. Jill is such a," and I'm like, well, good, because one of my big things with the writers was trying to make her not be perfect from the start. I was like, she cannot be another one of these 50s housewives wearing the perfect little outfits. And she's got a spotless house. Even when she's really super busy, you never see anybody clean the house. There's no maid. And yet somehow the house is perfect. She's always dressed perfectly. She always looks perfect. She's always calm. And somehow she has 3 children, a perfect house, a job. And, it's like Claire Huxtable. Which I understood in that case. Well, I talked to them later about why Cosby, how could she be a doctor or lawyer or whatever and have 1,800 children and be sexy and perfect and no babysitter, no maid, how is that happening? And I think the problem was they really wanted to be, that was a tricky thing because it was the first really upscale Black family. And they didn't want to have what were they going to have, a Black maid there, a housekeeper? That they're trying to avoid all those stereotypes.
That makes sense.
So, but yeah, so
only mostly nice compliments, and fans were generally.
Yeah, I had a guy. I was following my son through a Dodger game once, and the kids were all ahead of me, and I had a cap on. I always had to do that, because I get mobbed, and I had a baseball hat pulled down, and this guy, he grabbed my arm and jerked me backwards and ripped my cap off. And said, "You think you're hiding under that? I know who you are," and wouldn't let go of me.
Man,
that freaked me.
Yeah,
really
makes sense.
There are some strange people out there.
yeah, that was bad. And I lost the kids. They got so far ahead of me, I couldn't find them. And I'm like jerking my arm trying to get away from this guy. And that was scary.
Scary situation. Transitioning to something entirely less scary here. Who would you want to play you in a film?
Oh, no. Oh, I never, gee.
Yeah.
There are so many good actresses out there. And they'd have to be, well, I was 40, when I did that part. So, but she could, I don't know, I guess I can't think of, who would you say? I'm drawing a blank.
This isn't really my speed round, so I'm not sure I should weigh in here. I have no idea.
And I'm terrible at guessing people's ages, so I'd have to think of a younger actress who would be the right age.
It can be any, we'll just put them in a time machine. How about that?
Oh.
You can pick anybody.
Guys, there's so many great younger actresses out there that, let me pass on that one.
And like when we're done with the podcast in like 2 years, we'll just come back and we'll ask you more questions. So
I'll have to ask other people. I should ask Bruce Ferber, who I still talk to.
Yeah, definitely.
I should ask Bruce. What do you think about that? Bruce is now a novelist. He was our other showrunner between the 3rd year and the 8th, and we still talk. And we should talk about his costumes, because I always feel like Nicole Gorsuch was my customer, and she's, I think, the best customer I ever had. I never saw anybody work harder at finding really unusual things. And the thing was, Jill was kind of an ex-hippie, which, you find out about gradually, through the length of the show. She was a rebel, rebelled against her dad, and she was also, smoked dope in college and whatever. And I loved that Nicole didn't dress me like every other show I've ever done. They always dress you the same way. So if you're a mother, it's always really conservative and really boring clothes. And I love that was really having trouble because I was so overweight to start with, and I haven't had a waist since I had all these enormous children. And so she's really good at dressing people around their problems, but she would go out and find these wonderful vintage jackets and vintage sweaters. And I was wearing those long dresses that, sort of 90s, I guess, but I wasn't dressing at all like in this sort of boring slacks and a little, preppy blouse and a little preppy sweater. I was not wearing what your typical housewife on television would wear. And then when I lost weight, then she's also putting me in some really kind of cute things. So I always loved that she was, spend hours, and she also dressed all the Tool girls. She dressed Debbie, and she dressed Lisa, and she dressed guest stars. And so she had really cute things that she put them in too. She got really inventive about the way she dressed them. So I always thought she's sort of an unsung person in this picture, because she did really interesting things with the clothes for the women.
Yeah. I imagine, 8 years on a show this successful, there's so many people behind the scenes or who don't ever get talked about, who just, they're the glue people on the show, and they do so much.
Oh, our Warren, I don't know if anybody's ever talked about Warren, but he was our prop master. And, we did have a series of special effect people who came and went, because they kept trying to kill Tim, which was inconvenient.
Yeah, that wouldn't be great.
It's just not a good thing. I mean, I can't tell you how many times he got hurt, by a special effect that didn't work. Like, he was supposed to ram his head into a fence, and the fence wouldn't break the way it was supposed to, so he just ended up head injury. Or like his socks at the snow scene was supposed to smoke, but instead caught fire. Or things like that. Where you remember when the caterpillar went totally backwards in the Tool Time scene?
Oh yeah.
He was supposed to just drive this. And it was supposed to just kind of go up over the step, but it went so far backwards it looked like it was going to go.
Oh, I forgot about over. That. Yeah, that
was not on purpose.
Oh man,
yeah, there were my terrifying things that happened. And then, of course, I would have told you the horse story, but I've already told it on Reddit, so I can't tell it here. And it's really dirty. And I don't know if you have children listening to this podcast.
Don't worry, we'll post a link to it on Twitter.
No, I don't think I should tell the horse story. It's one of those things I knew you were going to ask about backstage stories that were, I can't tell that story with children.
All right, well, we won't press it any further.
You got to draw the line somewhere.
I do indeed. I know one thing that I could tell that's a kid story, that all three, Nicole and I were just talking about this actually. So the boys can blame Nicole for this. That was, by the way, my evil laugh. All right.
Horrifying.
So Jonathan, by the way, I recruited. I'm just going to say really quickly because Jonathan and I talk still all the time because I've recruited Jonathan and he and I are on the same membership first party of SAG-AFTRA. So I see him a lot. So he'll hear about this. Apparently, I was sort of half aware of this. Jonathan, Zach, and Taryn were all madly in love with the same girl. And she was next door on Boy Meets World.
Oh.
Her name is Danielle
Fischel.
Yeah. Yes. And every time she would come backstage, they would be all abuzz and be going to Nicole and say, I have to change my clothes. I have to wear something different. Danielle's coming. And there's another boy would come in. Danielle's coming. I have to wear something different. She's coming. Danielle's coming. And they'd be in the makeup room all going, she's coming over. And fix my hair. And all three boys apparently were just wild.
I felt the same way. Growing up.
You did
definitely.
not.
Yeah, I definitely did. Yeah.
Who didn't love Topanga?
You're talking.
Are you serious? I was so unaware
absolutely,
of all this.
Yeah. No, she was very important to me as well, I would say, around that time. So
very important. That's a good way of putting it.
Where is she now? What is she doing now?
That's a good question.
I think she's on. Well, she was on Girl Meets World, right?
Yeah, I think they're both on that.
Yeah.
She's married to someone that does a lot of. He's like a comedian. He does a lot of podcasts. I can't think of his name, but she's around.
Is she like married? Has kids?
They just got married. I can't think of who the guy's name is. Oh man, I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if they have kids.
Are you heartbroken?
You know what?
You know what? Breaking news: they got divorced in 2016, Adam. So you know.
Hey! I should tell the boys. Well, Zach is happily married.
Right.
Jonathan is not happily married yet, and Taryn is wandering around the world. So who knows what's going on with him? No, Taryn goes around the world helping people. He was out the Philippines.
I saw something that he helped with, like the hurricanes last year, doing some of the hurricane cleanup.
Yes, he did, and he was up in North Dakota. Helping with the Native American thing up there. He took a big truckload of supplies up there, and he does art installations, like really big ones, like around the world. And he built a boat, and he does a lot of sailing. And he still has his cheese company. You know, he had a vegan cheese company, and I think he's still making money from that.
Yeah.
But I haven't talked to him
in a while. A man of many talents.
Yeah, he's a super smart guy. And I'm still mad at him for dropping out of college because he's so smart. And, I don't know if he'll ever go back and do that, but he's really... But, a smart kid. All of them were.
Yeah, it shows. I think it shows definitely on the show.
We're very lucky because, I've worked with kids my whole career. I started out in Gypsy on Broadway with kids. And, the fact that they have stayed as stable as they are is a miracle. I mean, because they know they, as child actors, have other child actor friends who they've watched, go down the tube. So they're very aware. In fact, Jonathan and Zach at one point have been shopping around a script where they play themselves, and in the script they had drawn in a lot of these other famous child actors that they knew. It was kind of about that whole issue, the script, but I don't know what happened to it. I don't know. But and Jonathan writes and directs, and I think he's still working on things he's writing. But my plan for Jonathan is that he will go into politics, and that's when I recruited him at SAG-AFTRA. I was like, okay, Jonathan, I got your whole life mapped out for you now. And remember... That's
convenient for him.
Yes, well, Jonathan used to talk about how he wanted to be a politician back then when we did the show. Mm-hmm. And I was like, please do, because, it's always the Republicans that are so corrupt and awful, and we need a really honest, smart, ethical guy to run as a Democrat. You'd be perfect. Do it. And please grow up and do that and be an honest guy and do this. And so eventually, he went to Harvard, he went to Columbia, blah, 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 blah. He's like me. He didn't really like being famous, and he kind of withdrew for the whole thing, just like I did. I mean, both of us hated being famous, and both of us really just kind of withdrew from that whole scene. And so when I saw him and he came back, and I called him up and I said, remember when you said, what do you really want to do? And he said, I don't know. I'm directing, writing, I haven't really figured it out. And I said, if you would join me on the SAG board and you like it and we can get you interested in SAG-AFTRA, we do a lot of government work. And if I can get you on the SAG-AFTRA board, then my whole plan for you is you get on the SAG-AFTRA board, we get you on the government affairs committees, we move you up to running for office at SAG-AFTRA, you become president of the union. After you're president of the union, you become governor of California, and then you become president of the United States.
Yeah, that sounds great.
End of story.
Sounds simple.
Your life is solved. You become Reagan, but you're a Democrat. So he laughed, and actually he's working out. He's so smart, and he's very measured and doesn't say anything without a great deal of thought, unlike me, who's impulsive and loudmouth. He's really great, and I'm hoping that he'll stay with it, because we need more younger people in that union, more young actors who are caring about it and paying attention to it, and coming on that board. And he is really exactly what this union needs. I'm really hoping that he stays with it.
One final, this is not to be speed round, but
nothing is a speed round as long as I'm going blah, 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 blah.
No.
Relative speed.
I mean, speed is relative. No, I wanted to ask, you mentioned this earlier. I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about the West Wing role as Sheila Brooks, particularly because I'm a huge Alan Alda fan, and I just watched. Especially the last 2 years of that show, I thought were just great, and I just finished them up probably 3 or 4 months ago.
Really, you think that? Because
I know,
huge.
I think it's because I'm such an Alda fan that, like, to me it was I thought it just kept getting better. I've heard the opposite. I don't care about that, but I just want to know. Yeah.
Well, everybody's divided up into the camp of Aaron and Tommy Schlamme, who's, by the way, an old friend of mine. I introduced Tommy and Christine, and then John Wells. So I came in on the John Wells years, and I thought that those last 2 years were fascinating. But I also, of course, those first 4 years. But Aaron was writing every single episode. I can't imagine what it was like. They were getting those pages on the set. And, doing those, I did a lot of talk and walks on Strong Medicine. And this, of course, talk and walks were, they were always doing these like very long talk and walks on West Wing. Well, on Strong Medicine, we always all did something called a George Clooney, where we would, have everybody had their lines written all over the set on like, next to the patient on the bed. And I had to speak 5 languages as well as medical ease. And so that was sometimes really difficult. On West Wing, nobody cheated. There were no cheat sheets anywhere. People were just doing those long, wordy speeches, and you just had to be on. And I'm not sure. Do you feel like watching them that the last 2 years are really different writing than the first 4? I mean,
yeah, I think it's a different show because you're losing a lot of Sheen kind of takes a back seat. So I just feel like it becomes more about the kind of side supplemental characters. And I really like the Jimmy Schmidt, Alan Alda stuff, but I just thought was fantastic. Like to me, that was the peak of the show.
I did too. And I also think that, I think that Jimmy wasn't going to win.
It was.
I think they had to change that.
That's interesting. Yeah.
When John Spencer died, I think that changed.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
Well, now that you guys have gone on the West Wing tangent,
sorry,
Jordan. I know that was.
I've never watched it, so there's so much I'm going to learn.
Oh my gosh, you haven't watched it?
Yeah. What are you doing, man?
Well, you have a treat ahead of you.
I know,
have a big treat. It'll be great.
I've been waiting for just this moment. So, but I did want to ask. You saw a little bit on Twitter. We had a lot of people who are just excited about this interview. So we asked them for a couple of questions, and we only picked a couple, and we wanted to relay them to you to get them involved. So this first one is from a Twitter user at Kevin Haynes, and he asked, "What was your most embarrassing moment filming the show?"
Oh my goodness, there were so many embarrassing moments. I really don't like going up on lines, and it's so great because the audience really likes you to go up on lines at least once. They love that. And I really almost never did. I was like one of the people that just kind of never did. But I remember there was one time, I think I went up 3 times in a row, and it was because somebody I knew was there. And I got really nervous because somebody was there. And so, of course, when somebody that you know is there and you want to do well, I went up once and the audience loves that. It's like, okay, went up once, yeah, fine. And so then I went up again and I'm like, oh my God, I've lost my mind. So embarrassed twice. The audience still loves it the second time. But if you go up the third time, it's like you want to crawl away and die. And it was somebody was there. I don't even remember who it was, but somebody I knew was there. And I went up the third time. And that was like, so embarrassing. And I think it was the only time. It was very unusual. And I think, of course, that's what they have in one of the gag reels.
Oh, yeah.
I think they actually put it on the gag reel.
That's funny.
Because it was so unusual. I mean, it just didn't happen very much. And I think it was on the gag reel, and I really did.
And now that moment can live forever. So. Yes,
of course they put it on the gag reel. And I was like, oh no, now everyone's going to think I'm brain dead. Just like, But I'm trying to think. No, there wasn't anything like, my dress fell off or anything. I'm trying to.
That's good. That's good. That wouldn't have been good.
It wouldn't be on a gag reel, probably.
No.
No, that would not be. No.
The other question that we have here is from Laura, and she wanted to talk a little bit about Last Man Standing. So you had a role there, obviously, with Helen Potts in a couple of episodes. Yeah. So she just wanted you to discuss like what that was like being with Tim again, and obviously a very different role and being on that show.
Well, I wanted to make Helen a little different, so I made Helen kind of macho. I don't know, probably nobody noticed it, but I kind of tried to make her a little more, I kind of made her a little butch. I don't know if anybody even noticed it, but I was trying to just make her a little less feminine than Jill would be, just so that it wouldn't seem like there was any kind of romantic relationship between them. And so it'd be more like she was buddy-buddy with Jill rather than any kind of remotely marriage or romantic relationship between the two of them. So I was kind of trying to make her more of a, and because she was into tools, she's into tools, so I was sort of doing that. And it was weird. I wasn't really aware of us having any kind of instant chemistry. I mean, I was just doing the scenes, and playing what they wrote us. And I had not done a sitcom since Home Improvement. So it was the first time I was really nervous because I really had been avoiding comedy for years. I really prefer doing drama, and comedy's so I was very nervous about doing it. And Tim was so kind because I think it took him a minute. It took him a while to realize, wow, Pat's nervous. Pat's nervous about doing this. And then I think he was a wreck. I think at first he was just so, in his own sort of confusion of, oh my God, here's my old wife, and then here's my new wife, and then my real wife is out in the audience, and I am in a hopeless male situation of having three wives in one place. How can anyone deal with this? So, and for me, it was weird because I remember at one point in the evening, I looked over and there he was in bed with Nancy. And I'm like, well, that's not right.
How dare you?
That is not right. You're not supposed to be in bed with that woman. So what's happening here? This is because something happens. I went back and forth between this thing of, this is really weird to be working with Tim. And, okay, so we're just going to do this scene, but it's not like the old times. And I'm a different character. Okay, so now we're just doing that. But it's not like we have any immediate chemistry. We haven't seen each other in years, and it's not the same. And then people would say, oh my God, you have the same chemistry. It's the same. And I'd be like, really? Because I'm just not conscious of it at all. And I'd say like, no, things are totally different. We don't have a relationship anymore. This is like a whole new thing happening here, right? But then I would see him in bed with her, and I'd be like, get out of that bed.
Some jealousy. Yeah.
Yes, and so then I'd be like, whoa, this is weird. And then Nancy is the nicest person in the world. She is so kind and so great. And so then I'd be loving Nancy, and then I'd be doing scenes with the two of them, where the two of them sitting there as the married couple, and I'd be like, this is so surreal, because there's like a 20-year time thing in here in between when Tim and I were married, and now it's like my husband remarried in real life, and it would be like if I was over there visiting Colleen and Ray, only in front of millions of people, and without all the baggage that we have. because it's so bizarre. And people say, "Do you watch Last Man Standing?" I have, occasionally, but sometimes it creeps me out so much I can't watch it because it's too much like watching. It's like if I were to, watch through a window my ex-husband and his wife.
I can see that.
It's too creepy. It's like, and they really do a lot of home improvement plots. They're all the time doing stuff that is so home improvement. I'm like, well, why don't they just get a home improvement script and copy it? Because there's some things that are so much what we did in home improvement that I'm like, wait, we did that. We did that exact plot.
Well, it just speaks to the quality of home improvement.
Yeah, after all these years.
There are things that are so the same. And, but it's a marriage. It's 3 children, but they're girls instead of boys. I love their family life, though. And I think when I watch it, I really think that what's great about that show is him with daughters and her. She's fantastic. Their relationship, I think their chemistry is fantastic, and their relationship is wonderful. And I love the daughters. I thought those daughters were really great actresses, and his interplay with the daughters, because now in life he has 2 daughters, and Katie's grown up now, and she's so nice, and so all of the work that he does in that family life is so relaxed and so real and so great. And I really, really, really enjoy that. And I think that that's always Tim's strength, is when he gets into that family life stuff, because he's so much stronger an actor than almost any stand-up that I can think of. Mm-hmm. Most of the stand-ups out there aren't actors. They're stand-ups. And Tim is an actor. He is open. He is reactive. He listens, he responds and listens and doesn't have any guard. Can I tell one story? There's a story of really early on when Tim was learning how to act, really. It was one of our first episodes. And when John was directing, and he really owes a lot to John Pasquin, because John Pasquin was really his first acting teacher. And so we're doing this episode. I think it may have been one of the ones where Tim was building in the house. I think it's the one when he built the bathroom, and we had to move out of the house.
Yeah.
I was so mad at him, and I had to move out. And then we were making up. We're making up. We're in the living room, and I was hugging him and crying because I'm making up. And I remember, this is what I mean about him being such a good actor and not even knowing he was, and how open. I used to say all the time, Tim is a really good actor, and people don't know it. He was, I'm talking to him and I had tears in my eyes, and I'm looking in Tim's face, and we're still really new working with each other. And I'm looking at his face, and his eyes, he saw me crying, and his eyes started to tear up. And because that's how reactive he was, he was always just right there listening and just responding, which is so amazing, because you have really, big actors in New York who don't listen and respond that well, and so I see tears in his eyes, and then I see him freak out that he is having this emotional reaction, and he stops everything. And he goes, wait a minute. And John goes, what's wrong? And he goes, well, she's really upset. and John goes, she's acting, Tim. And he goes, yeah, but really he stopped it because he was afraid of his own reaction. Yeah. It had nothing to do with him worrying about me crying. He had to stop to collect himself. But what's interesting is I have seen Tim tell this story. And when Tim tells the story, he says, we were working together, and Pat was really mad, and she was being really angry. And so I stopped the scene, and I said, wait a minute, she's really mad. And John said, she's acting, Tim. It wasn't me being mad. It was me crying. And the reason he stopped is because he was embarrassed that he had a feeling. And I think that's so sweet that, here's Tim apologizing for being a good actor. I was like, Tim, I used to berate him because in his off time, he wasn't taking movies that showed off what a good actor he was. Right. Because instead he's doing Jungle to Jungle and blah, blah, blah. He's doing a lot of movies that are just like more of Tim, the Toolman Taylor, but in a movie. And I'm like, Tim, you are such a better actor than you are showing by doing these movies that are making Disney a lot of money and are just more of the same, but they're like cashing in on the Tim the Toolman Taylor persona and not showing what he could do as an actor, which I always thought would be more than he was getting to show.
Yeah, we talked about that quite a bit early on. We didn't realize like how natural he was. You know, obviously that being his first real experience with that kind of acting.
I think when you're little, when you're young, you only really react to like just from the grunting and like,
the funny
and stuff. And then as you get older, you kind of notice the nuances.
He is good. Yeah. I mean, he was so good, and I just people. I think they responded to other things because those in his drinking years, I think early on in his drinking years when he would host things and stuff, I think he may have offended people, in Hollywood. So he didn't make a lot of friends personally or something. So I just think people didn't, he suffered because of that. I think, and there was something that Eisner did when he was first nominated for an Emmy. Eisner made this big deal and had a parade and, all this stuff. I think even before he got nominated, there was something that was really offensive and offended people around the time when he was nominated for the Emmy. And then he never got nominated again. And I don't think it had anything to do with his performance. I think it's people were offended that there was this assumption that he would get nominated or something, and then they never nominated him again. But I don't think it had anything to do with this. Performance was fantastic. And I have to tell you, early on, the three guys, the Wind Dancer guys, who, by the way, I have to also say, I want to make sure I get this in. Nobody, I told you I did 3 sitcoms before this. I have never seen writers take a script that didn't work at all on Monday, because I told you Tim and I used to go in and work with the script on Mondays. We went in more than once, and there would be nothing that was good about the script on Monday. And we would go in and we'd be like, oh my God, this isn't working. And they would be that way too. They'd be like, oh my God. They would do an entire page 1 rewrite. They would stay up all night long. And we would get there the next morning and they would just be leaving because they would have written an entire script over again. And we would get page 1, totally new script that would be brilliant. I mean, we would go from a script the day before that was bad, and the next day come in and it would be completely rewritten and be really good. And those guys would have stayed up all night doing that. And you never saw that. You don't see that with people who aren't the originators. That was the problem with them leaving after the first 2 years, is that after that, except that Elliot's not like that. But in general, you don't, and Bruce, you don't get, if you don't keep the original, one person who's an original creator of a show through the whole life of a show, then you never have somebody who cares that much about it because it's not their baby. What you do is if you look at the shows that are really successful, like Friends, there was an original creator on Friends all the way through the life of the show. There was an original creator on most of the shows that are really successful. If you look, one of them stayed through the whole life of the show. And that was hard for us because our 3 left. And they gave it to Elliot, which was great. But unfortunately, Elliot had to leave a couple of years in and just come in a couple of days a week because of some things in his family that happened. So and then Bruce ran it, and Bruce was great, but not the same kind of experience that Elliot and the original 3 had. So what happened is it fell on me and Tim to say to the subsequent writers and directors that started being like a revolving door, okay, no, you can't write that. That's not who this character is, because you haven't been here. You don't know the character, so you can't suddenly do this with this character. She's never been this way before, or he's never been this way, or you're writing. This is what I ended up doing a lot was the original 3 guys who were so fantastic taught everybody in the writing room about writing a sitcom. Really, they were teaching. They gave all the writers hats that said, "What's the story?" That's what their hats said on them. And they taught me so much. I had come from years of doing new plays in New York, so I knew a lot about, or something, a little bit, about structure, about story, character, plot, about, just write jokes, right? And I had learned, then I learned from these 2 guys, listening to them in these meetings, about you have to have, this particular show is, you can have an A storyline, a B storyline, but the Wilson scene has to be about either A or B. You can't have 5 storylines, or you can't have A, B, and then have the Wilson scene be about a D storyline. There can't be that. There's 22 minutes. You can't have that many stories. So what happened in the later years is you'd get people having no story at all and just setups for jokes. And we'd walk in and Tim and I would be like, okay, what's the story? all you're doing is setting up jokes. What do we want? What are we trying to accomplish here? Where's the story? Or there'd be 5 stories. And I'd have to say, okay, pick 2 stories. You got 5 here. Which 2 do you want to tell? And one of those has to be the Wilson scene. So decide which are the 2 most important, pick those. And then, because that's what started happening. But those 3 writers, Matt, David, and Carmen, wrote the most amazing scripts. And they wrote Howard's End, which is the one.
Full circle. Here we go.
Which is the reason why I had written. It's funny because I thought Howard's End was written by another writer who is another one of my favorite writers. Howard Morris was another one of my favorite writers, and I was thinking, I looked it up because I thought he wrote that thing, but no, it was written by Matt, David, and Carmen, and another writer. And one of the reasons I loved it, and I'm going to tell you all, since you all listening won't know what Howard's End is, it's the episode that is where Brad is supposed to be taking care of Jennifer Sadarsky's fish. And
this poor fish.
Goldfish. And he decides that this fish, I think, needs to have warmer water. And so he puts a light over the goldfish bowl to keep the fish nice and warm and fries the fish. And this was when Andy Cadiff started directing us, and he had a great shot at the beginning of this shot. It's a close up on the fish floating on the top of the water and Jonathan's face, like right over the goldfish bowl. And that was a great start to that shot. And then I think, doesn't Jonathan do a count, like a heavyweight fight? Like,
yes.
3, 2, 1.
Yep. He's down. He's out. Yep.
All right. So that was hilarious. And then what I really love, because I have sons and it is so perfect for sons. They're like, well, what are we going to do? I just have to go buy another one. But what if it doesn't match? And he's like, well, we'll go to the fish store and buy another one. And he just grabs the goldfish and stuffs it in his pocket and goes. For me, I just thought that was one of the funniest things I'd ever seen the kids do. It was just so perfect for me about boys. Like a girl would have gone and gotten a baggie and put it in the baggie or
had
put
a
the
burial
little Tupperware thing. But yes, exactly. I would have gotten a little Tupperware thing and put a little Tupperware thing or something. But what does a boy do now? To stuff the dead fish in your pocket and go to the thing. And then the other plot line was Jill and Tim arguing about who owns what, which, by the way, I come from a family of 4 girls. And this is a huge issue. It was a huge issue. My mother never worked and my father did, right? So this is why this episode for me was always a really particularly important episode, because I knew that this is an issue in many houses in America. Okay, so you're the wife, so what? You don't own any of this stuff? I mean, and particularly for women who gave up their careers I knew women who gave up their careers in order to have the children and be home with the children and then let the husband go forward with their careers. And so they had chosen to do that so that they could have the family. But what? Oh, so then that means the house, because the house is more bought with the husband's money, that she doesn't own it, or she's not. I mean, it's a very, very tricky, interesting, and controversial subject, which I thought we handled pretty well. And it's a really big deal between married couples. So I was, when I heard you all saying that you hated the episode,
I find it hard to believe we would have said that. I don't.
And that's the thing.
Oh, God, but this is not a good episode. This is like, that's not one of my favorites. That's like, and Jill and Tim, they fight over who owns what, and that's all.
It's not a problem I have with my marriage, so maybe I just didn't see that.
Oh my God! Well, this is huge. This is a huge thing, and it's still a huge thing. And but most families need both people working. Now, when you have both people working, it becomes a little bit less of a problem, because clearly both of you are buying everything. I mean, maybe both of you are buying the cars, both of you are investing in a house, both of you are. But there are homes where one person is having to stay home and take care of the children or whatever. And okay, so what? When you make that trade-off, who owns what? I mean, in a divorce, it's divided down the middle, right? If it's no-fault divorce. So why are there still men around who think they own everything?
Yeah, it's kind of a wild, going into marriage, if you have that perception, it's kind of wild to think that, 2 are becoming 1, So to say that, you're not sharing things, or you own one more than another, it's kind of a wild thing that ends up happening.
I love you. I want to marry you. You have a great attitude.
Yeah, I just don't. I've never understood that. Like, it just has never made sense to me. Like, that's
okay. But do you think you feel that way because the new millennial generation is more evolved? You were raised correctly by your mother. Thank you, Mom. Do you think that it's because I know my kids are. I mean, my son is, my oldest son is very evolved. And, both my sons are very involved. Of course, one of my sons is gay, but the son who's older and married, very involved. My other son, obviously very involved. I mean, so I wonder, is this just the next generation? Is it? It can't be uniform, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot of things that go into it. It probably helps if that's modeled for you with your parents, of course.
My dad was a feminist. He was raised by two women. He was raised by his mother, who divorced 3 times, and his grandmother. And then he proceeded to have 4 daughters. So for him, I mean, it wasn't extremely feminist. It was a little bit, but it was like, you all need to have a career so that if your husband dies, you can support yourself.
Right.
So it only went so far. But it was really important to him that we all go to college, have some sort of skill, have some way. And he was incredibly supportive of me being an actor. He went to see everything I ever did.
That makes a big difference, definitely.
Yeah. And he was. It made a huge difference for me. What I thought was so sweet was years after I finally, because the home brand didn't happen when I was 40. I always supported myself as an actor, but there were many, many, many really bad years there when I was in New York and struggling, and my parents were living outside of New York. And I found out years later that they would say things to my sister like, when is she going to give up? And they never said that to me.
Oh, that's nice.
Isn't that the sweetest thing? They never said it to me.
Well,
I'm so glad they didn't. If they'd said that to me, I think I might have folded.
Yeah, you would have thought twice, and that would have obviously colored like what you were going to do going forward. So.
Oh yeah,
cool.
I mean, there were times when I did feel like giving up, and if they'd said that, I don't know whether that would have been really hard.
Yeah, it's such a tough, thing to begin with. To not have the support of the people closest to you would just be.
Well, what do you guys want to do? I mean, I know you have this podcast, and are you comics? Are you actors? What do you do?
Yeah, Adam, what do you do?
Well, it's an interesting question. I guess I'm not a comic. I think I am, but I don't think anybody else does.
Well, I mean, do you work? Do you do the clubs around in LA?
No. I live in.
I like the idea.
This is a flattering reading. No, I'm a copywriter. I work for a company. I'm in suburban Chicago. I am trying to.
You're in Chicago. I thought you were here in LA.
No.
I'm in Orlando, so we are just not anywhere.
We're a ways away. I'm trying. I write a lot of like screenplays and pilots and so on. So I guess that is a path that I'm kind of working towards as I work, my full-time job. But yeah, I would say screenwriting is kind of my long-term goal, and Jordan's got his own kind of things.
It's so funny
my own kind of things.
Well, because you're doing these live podcasts, and I would think that you would be going towards some sort of radio thing or spokesperson thing, or doing comedy live. I mean, doing storytelling or something. I think
you should do them all. The podcast has really we didn't expect a lot to come out of this. We started a couple of years ago, and we just kind of. We went to high school together, and we had kind of Davison High School, and just outside of Flint. So we graduated, 2008. So we stayed in touch over the years, and we just kind of started this podcast on sort of a whim. And I think it's gone. We're talking to you, so it's gone a lot better than either one of us expected. And yeah, I think.
How many people do you think listen to this?
You're the only person that we would divulge this information to, but I would say go ahead, Jordan.
There's competitors that we can't tell that information to. We're very like, if you look at the grand scheme of podcasting, we're very average. Like we're not one of those podcasts that's going to get sponsors and all that kind of stuff. Which is fine.
It could build. It could build too. I mean, if
it continues to grow.
You kind of
just slowly, but we continue to enjoy it. So yeah.
Well, I hope that I don't know. I haven't heard this yet, and I don't know yet whether to be really embarrassed. I really did mean to record myself while I was doing this, and I totally forgot. I was going to turn my phone on and record it so that I could listen to it later and decide whether, you shouldn't have said that. I always...
Don't worry. I will edit all of this and make sure you get to hear it before anyone else. So.
Oh, gosh. I'm always regretting later just about everything I say. I think most people are like that. I mean, I don't know a person who's heard their voice on an answering machine and hasn't gone, I hate my voice.
It was tough at first.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody hates their voice. I mean, actors hate their voices, so it's not, it's pretty common. But you're, it seems like this is something that you might be able to segue into other things. It sounds like you should be
maybe
comedy.
The writing I'm doing is pretty comedic, and I think this podcast probably helped me get my current job right now. So a lot of good things have come of this, and Now
I'm just asking. You don't have to be SAG-AFTRA or anything like that to do a podcast, right? You could just.
Oh no! Yeah. Basically, you just need a microphone, and that's it.
Wow. It's so
Alan
cool.
Alda has a podcast, so you could easily start your own.
I just saw that. He, by the way, he is the nicest person and such a workaholic. I mean, how many people? I mean, when we were doing West Wing, whenever he wasn't working, he was in his trailer writing. And he's written so many books, and he wrote, I mean, how many people? He's got, 30 Emmy nominations for writing, for directing, for acting. And he's written 100 million books. And he's working all the time.
He's putting me to shame, that's for sure.
Oh my gosh. He would be writing in his trailer all the time. I mean, it's like just constantly producing something. And his books are hilarious. I don't know if you've read them.
I've read anything he's written? Not any more than just a couple of pages at a bookstore, no.
They're very wise. I mean, they're wonderfully wise and so observant and funny. And I think he's the most universally loved, and I've never met anybody that didn't like Alan.
Yeah. We've talked about doing a home and podcast book club, so maybe that'll be one of the things that we add to the list once we start it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea.
There you go.
I love that idea. So do you have any other questions?
Well, yeah, I mean, we kind of went through everything. So, to kind of finish up, we wanted to give you an opportunity to plug again, maybe that charity you want to plug again, or if there's anything that you're working on.
There's two that I work with a lot because of Dad's brain disease.
Sure.
And one is the Cure PSP, which if you read it, it's a pretty long, you have to kind of search through people's stories, and then you'll see my stories on there because I'm their spokesperson. I haven't really been doing much with them since it kind of changed hands, the people that are running it now. But there's also an organization called the National Organization of Rare Diseases, which is I got to because of Cure PSP. This National Organization of Rare Diseases helped our smaller organization quite a bit, and so I ended up helping them. So I have done their dinners, and I've worked for them a couple of times as well. So you'll see that on my Twitter. Have you found you found the Twitter, right? So do you think I'm just obnoxiously too political on my Twitter?
No.
I'll tell you why I did Twitter. When I had been retired for so long and I was having to try to come out from under my rock again, my oldest son, Henry, the one that works at Bloomberg, I was like, Mom, you have to have Facebook. You have to have Twitter. I'm like, no. I'm not going to do it. It's an invasion of my privacy. I just want to act. I was always somebody who wanted to act. I hated the red carpet. I hated the professional celebrity jobs. I really just hated all that stuff. And he said, you have to do it. All the actors today have to have a social media presence. And, you're having to crawl out from nobody even remembers who you were. You're going to have to do this. And I was like, but I'm so stupid and I can't think of anything funny to say. And I don't want to have to give up my private life. I don't want, he said, well, then just talk about politics. Because then you don't have to give up anything about your personal life. And then you could just do that. And you love politics and you can talk about that. And, and then occasionally throw out a picture of the past or something. So that's kind of what I've done. But now, I get, and then I thought, well, maybe this is a sort of a mission because I have so many red state people that never watch anything but Fox News or Breitbart or whatever. And so maybe I can just send things onto my Twitter that they would never see any other way because they refuse to watch anything but Fox News and Breitbart. Maybe if I keep putting information up there that they wouldn't see any other way, I can maybe turn a few of these people around before the next election.
You know, the more that you get people from other sides just like learning that each other are humans and being able to have conversations, I think that's always a good thing.
I've had some really civil conversations with people.
Yeah.
And that's really been great. Now, when people are really just mean and insulting, I just mute them.
Yeah, there's a lot of that on Twitter, so I think that's definitely the route to go.
Yeah, if they're only going to just be name calling and be unreasonable, and they don't do the research, and they're not researching, and they're not looking anything up, and they're just being mean and insulting, then I'm like, well, you were always a really bad actress anyway. So I don't know why you're like, you suck. You suck as an actress, and you suck as a person. And I'm like, okay, yeah, mute.
See ya. Yeah,
right. My biggest problem with your presence on Twitter is somehow you're not verified, and
I can't understand that. My son is verified.
Maybe they got you guys mixed up or something. I don't know.
He's verified, and he has way less followers, and all these people that have way less followers than I do are verified, and I'm like, and not as famous. My friend Jody Long, but I think Jody's verified because she's on the Academy Executive Committee. So I'm like, okay, so she's there are so many people, and then Henry said, well, he said he got verified because he got in there when they were still having applications, when you could do it with an application, and then they stopped verifying people, and they don't have that application.
We'll try to rally the troops and see if we can.
Yeah, we're gonna have to figure something out.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, it's just not happening, and it's weird because I'm 10,300 people.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot more than us, I'll say that.
That's for sure.
and I'm like, whoa, that's so weird. I don't know what the deal is, but I don't really care. Henry made me stand when I was doing, I didn't tell you the Facebook story.
Now's the time.
This quick Facebook story. I wasn't doing all this, and so I started this Facebook account, as Pat Richardson or Patricia Richardson, as Patricia Richardson. And so I was, posting pictures, doing all that. And it was pretty early when I started it. And there was another account with Patricia Richardson that had like a couple of thousand followers. It wasn't me. And I get this call from Tim one day. And I had already gotten a couple of pieces of fan mail in my home mailbox, which I don't get mail in my home mailbox. I don't know how these people found it. But I never answer that mail because I don't want people to have this address. And so I'm getting letters that are saying things like this. Thank you so much for all of your advice. You helped me so much. I so appreciate everything you've said. And I really, really, it was so helpful. And I'm like reading this going, what? I haven't given anybody advice. What are they talking about? And I don't want to answer the letter because I never answer anything that comes to my house. So then Tim calls me one morning and he goes, are you meeting my brother this morning at the airport in such and such a place in Michigan? And I go, what? No. And he goes, yeah, I didn't think so. And I'm like, what's going on, Tim? And he said, someone is pretending to be you on Facebook.
Wow.
And they have been writing my brother, who's a widower, for over a year. And he is convinced that he has been talking to you for the last year. That he's been writing you. He said that you've been writing that, and he didn't tell me. And I'm like, Tim, why would he not tell you? And he said, I don't know. But he just told me that he's been writing you for a year and that that you're going to meet him at the airport this morning at such and such a time. And I told him that it was highly unlikely that you would do this without telling me, and that I didn't think that you would be there. And he's like, nope, I've been talking to her this whole last year and she's going to. And so he said, I got to get off. I'm going to call him and tell him. It's heartbreaking because his wife had died or something. And awful. And so he said, get on the phone with my people and they'll help you figure out how to fix your Facebook account or whatever. So I was like, no, that's okay. I'll talk to Henry. So I talked to Henry and Henry was like, okay, take a picture of yourself with a piece of paper that says, hi, I'm Pat Richardson. I'm the real Pat Richardson, and hold it up, and take a picture of yourself and put that on your Facebook account. And so I did that. And then I put it on my Twitter too. If anybody is also following a Patricia Richardson or has been communicating or talking with a Patricia Richardson on Facebook, that's not me. That's someone else pretending to me. And I said the same thing on my other Facebook, but then I didn't know what else to do.
Man,
I'm glad that we got you and not her for the podcast. I guess that would have shown pretty early on.
Well, I mean, obviously, this woman didn't show up. I mean, she wouldn't have shown up.
So strange.
he was headed for a disappointment anyway.
So the good part about social media is people like us can reach out to you and actually have these kind of conversations, and that's the bad kind of, so.
Well, and it's true for me too, because I answer people on my public Facebook page. There's a public page, there's Patricia Richardson. And when I have time, I go on and people send me messages and I try to write back. And that's how I've been able to answer a lot of people that have PSP. There's people whose family members have PSP, and so they write me on that page. And then I've been able to write them back and talk to them about it.
My. Well, we don't want to take up any more of your time. It's I
have no idea. We've been on for like 2 hours.
It's been incredible. Some of
the finest 2 hours of our lives,
I would say. Sorry, I've probably just been going blah, blah, blah,
No,
blah,
it's
blah,
been, we're so appreciative of your time, and thanks for being so gracious with it.
Well, thank you, and I hope that you cut this, because I'm just really excessively
We're going to we'll send you over what we have here, and if you want anything
a director's cut.
Yeah, you can let us know. And we'll take it from there.
Okay, well, thank you, and I hope it's okay, and I hope we increase your listening.
It definitely will, and thank you so very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Yep, take care.
You too.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
All right, and that's all we have today for the Home Podcast. Thank you again to Patricia Richardson for spending 2 hours with us and talking all things home improvement. And if you'd like to support some of the charities and organizations that she mentioned earlier to help defeat neurodegenerative diseases, you can donate to Cure PSP or the National Organization of Rare Diseases at psp.org or rarediseases.org. And don't forget to connect with us. Let us know if you'd like the interview. Reach out to us on Twitter at Home and Podcast. If you'd like to support our show and get behind-the-scenes extras, including the Last Man Standing episode we'll be covering in October, go to patreon.com/homeandpodcast. You can also support us by just leaving a review on iTunes. That'll help other people find us. So next week, we'll be back to our normally scheduled programming. We'll be covering Advise and Repent, so get ready for that, and take care.